Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is your host, Jackson Mummy, and today we're at episode 178, our last episode for 2017. And what a year it's been, right? Pretty amazing in lots of respects. And in today's episode, I'm going to try and recap the year for you a little bit. We're going to talk about some highs and lows, some things that happened, some trend lines that we see, and what we expect coming up for 2018. So I hope you'll stick around for that, kind of a special retrospective look. Now, before we jump into that look back at 2017, I want to just say on a personal note, I appreciate so much all of you who have supported this podcast. We are reaching numbers of downloads that kind of stagger me, way beyond what I ever expected we would have, as we're into our third year of the podcast now. And we really appreciate that. If this is your first time on the podcast, well, we want to welcome you and let you know that you're part of a growing family of people who are following this particular episode and podcast about all things bar exam related. You can watch all of our episodes on video by going to celebrationbarreview.com / for this episode, it'll be / 178. You can also listen to our podcasts on Apple iTunes, on iHeartRadio, on Spotify, lots of places. Wherever I think you get your favorite podcast, you'll probably find us. Or you can even go to our website at celebrationbarreview.com, click on the menu button that says podcasts, and go back to episode number 1, actually 000 it was, and all of the show notes, and you'll find them all right there. So lots of different ways to consume this information. And we're really excited. We know that the podcast has grown because you've told your friends about it, because you've rated us highly in all of the services, and it means a lot to me personally and to our team. Well, I'm a bit late getting this episode out, I have to admit. We stole away for the Christmas holiday and went into the Gulf Coast and then into New Orleans and had a chance to be at the New Orleans Saints Atlanta Falcons football game. So those of you that know anything about me know I'm a pretty happy guy today, pretty excited with that outcome. But going to a football game is a lot like the bar exam. It's moments of highs and moments of lows, and a lot of preparation and work obviously goes into what happens on the field. And if you're thinking about taking the bar exam in the upcoming year, we know that you've got some preparation to do as well. And we want to offer you some tools to help you get ready. There is a free webinar that we'll be offering on Thursday night, December 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern, so that would be 4 p.m. Pacific. The title of this webinar is How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. It's a look at the powerful, proven way to pass. And what we're going to do in that webinar is take you through 4 steps that you have to follow in order to be successful. We'll share lots of case studies with you from students who've done just that. We won't hide any, there's no hidden agenda, no hidden tricks up our sleeve. We're just going to show you straightforwardly what you need to know and what works for people and why the big box approach to bar review simply doesn't work very well, and what you can do differently that will give you the opportunity to be successful. In 2017, we had several thousand people go through that webinar with great success, and it really was life-changing, I think, for many of them. And I hope you'll be one of the people that joins us. Now, as I said, it's completely free of charge, but you do need to register in advance, and you can do that in one of a couple of ways. You can go to our website at celebrationbarreview.com, and on the front page, you'll see a button. Click there to register, and we'll get you set up. Or if you're watching this episode on video, just scroll down to the bottom of this page, and again, you can click to enroll. Now, if Thursday doesn't work for you or 7 p.m. Eastern isn't a good time, you'll also see a button for an on-demand version of the webinar. Rather than our live version, this is a recorded version, but it's got all the same great information and offers. We encourage you to watch it if that works better for you, and we'll answer your questions via email. In any event, you can take that and consume that information right away if that's what you want to do. And certainly we would encourage you to do that if you're taking the February exam in 2018. The clock is not in our favor at this point. In any event, a couple of different options there for that webinar. And then finally, I want to tell you about a special webinar that we ran live a couple of weeks ago. It was using mind maps to study for the bar exam. I'm going to be talking about mind maps more extensively here in a few minutes, but this is a tool that we found incredibly helpful for our students, really propelled many of them to success in their exams in 2017. And I did a special webinar, a live broadcast, right before the Christmas holiday, and it was met with great success. People loved the webcast. They thought it was terrific. This is unique material, proprietary material, and so we are charging for it. The fee is $95 to watch the webinar, and then you get unlimited replays. Now, if you're interested in that information about how to use a mind map, even what it is, and how you can make it really work for you on the bar exam, we would encourage you to register for that on-demand version of the mind map webinar. Again, it's an opportunity to watch at your convenience on your schedule, and we'll put a link on the video page and on the show notes page so that you can register and jump into that information as well. So I hope you'll check out those two webinars. I think they could be really powerful and helpful tools for you. Now, as we look forward to 2018, isn't that weird to even talk about that? We know that there's a lot coming, a lot that's going to be happening in the bar exam world generally. And I thought, if I'm going to talk about what's coming, probably makes sense to recap what a year it's been in 2017, because there were some pretty momentous changes. And so I wanted to take a few minutes today in the podcast to just kind of sum up what we saw happen in 2017, and then talk a little bit about where we think the exams are going and some things that we intend to do at Celebration Bar Review as we go into 2018. I guess I would begin by saying that the year 2017 was a tough year overall in the bar exam. There are little moments of brightness. There's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I'm pretty sure it's not a train coming at us. I hope it's not. But I see some modifications, some cracks in the bar examiner's veneer here. Not that they're the enemy, but I think that there's clearly a point at which the bar exam has become tilted. It's out of balance. It's not a particularly fair test in many respects anymore. And I think that in general, the reaction of the legal community, particularly the what I call big box bar reviews and the big box law schools, and even the little box law schools who charge big box prices, have really dropped the ball. They've done a really poor job in preparing people for this exam. Now, we've always sort of thought of ourselves at Celebration Bar Review as being the bar review for the underdog, and we had a really good year. We grew significantly. We offered way more information and classes and opportunities and tools, and we saw amazing results. We saw extraordinary turnarounds for people, individuals who had failed multiple times by many, many points, seeing 20, 30, 70-point gains and more on their bar exams and passing. It was a good year for our students, but it was a tough year overall, and I wanted to dive a little deeper into some trend things that I saw in 2017. So one of the big changes that happened during this past year was a change in the multi-state bar exam. Historically, what we've had was a 200-question exam, of which 190 questions counted towards your score, and 10 were called pre-test or evaluation questions. We also saw a slightly disproportionate balance between the 7 subjects. And of course, federal civil procedure and jurisdiction was added a couple of years ago, giving us 7 topics on the exam. Well, in 2017, we saw another switch to 175 questions that counted rather than 190. Now, for those of you that don't know, the 25 pretest or evaluation questions are not identified as such on the exam. They're scattered throughout the test, and they're just weird sometimes. I mean, sometimes they are the really crazy questions, and you go, okay, that's got to be a pretest question. But oftentimes, you just don't have any way of knowing. And there was a lot of concern going into this switch about what it would mean if you had fewer questions available, what would happen to your scores. And there was a lot of what I would call fake news or maybe facts and friends going on, where pundits, in the bar exam, in the bar review world, were saying, this is going to completely change everything in the multi-state and scores will go completely off the rails. And like, oh, come on. It doesn't make any difference at all. They're just going to change the scaling from 190 to 175. They'll change the way they report the scores, which is what the bar examiners did. But ultimately, it probably won't make much of a difference in the MBE. And I think it's a good lesson to learn. depending on where you're getting your information from about the bar exam, be very skeptical, be very cautious. I mean, in this era of, political fake news one way or the other, and, what facts are facts and which ones aren't, I think it's really important to suss out who the source is of your information. If it's somebody that's been in the bar review industry for 20 or 30 years, like we have, I think you can be reasonably sure that we know what we're talking about. On the other hand, if it's your cousin Guido, who's telling you, because he heard it from his friend Bobby, who heard it from Sally, who took it, at a law school and heard from somebody, don't do that. I mean, there's just way too much bad information out there. And for those of you that are studying, you know what that's called. It's hearsay. There's a lot of hearsay out there about the bar. And this was one of those areas where people just went crazy thinking, oh my God, this is going to change everything. Well, what did it do actually? Well, in July of 2017, the MBE score went up from a mean of 140.3 scale to 141.7. Yeah. Okay, so, I mean, it actually went up, not down. It didn't have much of a difference, but people went nuts about it in advance. And so if you're one of those people that's saying, well, how are they going to score it now? They'll score it the same way they've always scored it, but the scaling that's done will now be based on 175 questions rather than 190. Now, what that meant when reports came out, scoring reports, it was that instead of seeing the number of points you got or questions you answered correctly in each subject, they switched to a percentile comparison. So now you'd see what percentile you fell in torts and contracts, crim law, con law, and so on. And generally what you wanted to be looking for was that if that percentile number was 35% or higher, you generally pass that subject. Something lower than 35%, you can pretty well assume you failed that subject. And I think that actually brings some level of standardization to the MBE. Different jurisdictions were reporting the scores different ways, and it made for a lot of confusion. So now I think we're getting closer to a uniform way of dealing with and reporting these scores. What difference did it make to go to 25 questions and 7 subjects? Not a lot of difference in 2017. When we added civil procedure and jurisdiction, there was again some fear that it would drop the scores dramatically. That didn't really happen. By getting rid of some questions in subjects like property or con law that historically have been lower scoring, we saw the numbers rise slightly when we added civil procedure. So in general, if you're using a current set of materials, you'll be fine and should be good. Now, if you're using some old bar review materials from way back and they're still talking about 6 subjects, or they're talking about a disproportionate weight, or 190 questions, well, you're getting what you pay for. And you should be careful about that as you go forward into 2018. Well, I mentioned that the mean MBE score went up slightly in July. That was a good sign. It actually reversed a trend that we've been seeing over the past few years of the score dropping and dropping and dropping. As I say, the mean was 141.7, which would still be a failing score in California. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But generally, that's a pretty good number. And it turns out that it's the highest mean multi-state score that we've had since 2013. So that was a good moment. From 2013 until 2017, this was our highest score. So in the last 4 years, 8 administrations of the exam. I think in general that responds to the fact that the 25 questions and 7 subjects are there, and again, the scaling out of 175 questions. That's the good news. July exam, pretty good news. But there was some bad news. The February 2017 exam had the lowest MBE score ever. I mean, ever, since they started in the 1970s. The MBE score, in February 2017, was 134. So nearly, 7.7 points less. And you're going to say, what? Is it a really tough exam in February? I mean, this is, again, part of the mythology that's out there. And the answer is no, it's exactly the same test. The difference is in the composition of bar takers, who's taking the exam. So when people tell you, don't take the February exam because it's tougher, think to yourself, you are a moron. That is not at all what's going on here. The exams are the same. They're graded the same. Everything is the same. There are just more people who are bar repeaters taking it, and bar repeaters historically do worse. And that's all that's changed. But I am absolutely astounded when I hear people come up with this nonsense and then try and spout it off as though they know what they're talking about. They don't. That's the reality. We've got a lower bar pass rate in February. We had a lower MBE score in February. We had far fewer bar takers in February as well. In 2017, we have approximately 25,000 people that took the bar nationally, but in July, there were 46,000 people taking the bar. So you can see it's a pretty big difference, nearly double in size in July. And the difference is that you've got the traditional law schools producing their graduates coming out and taking the exam for the first time in July. This does a couple of things. One is it increases the number of bar takers, obviously, but now you're putting into the stream more students who are presumed to be successful on the bar exam. The truth is that a lot of people who take the exam, even for the first time in February, simply aren't as well prepared. They're either repeat bar takers or first-time takers who got into non-traditional sequences. And so it doesn't mean they're not as smart or as capable or as talented. It just means in general, you don't have these large classes from major top 20 or 30 law schools coming out, and they're the people that move those numbers significantly in the July bar exam. So if someone's telling you, don't take the February exam because your scores are lower, don't believe them. That's just not true. Interestingly enough, our pass rates for our students are about the same between February and July. Why? Because it doesn't really matter. We're going to teach you the same way. It's the same exam. You would expect the same outcome. So that's some things that are happening relative to the MBE and scoring and numbers generally. A second big trend that we saw in 2017 is that the Uniform Bar Exam, the UBE, is definitely not only here to stay, but it's growing and it's beginning to take over the country. Right now, the UBE is in 30 states as the UBE, which means the multi-state essay exam, the multi-state performance test, and the multi-state bar exam. Those three components, without anything that's state-specific, is now in 30 states. And several states have been added to the UBE coming up in the next couple of years. But in 2017, 7 states switched over to the UBE. So we had some real changes there, some states that had not been UBE before, and then they jumped in. And those states included Connecticut, Maine, looking at the others here, New Jersey, that was a big one. New York had come in the year before. Oregon came in 2017. South Carolina came in 2017. West Virginia and the Virgin Islands. So 7 new jurisdictions were switched to the UBE in the last year. 3 new states have announced that they're going to the UBE in the next year or in early 2019. Those 3 states are Maryland. We don't know yet which administration in 2019 will become a UBE for them. Massachusetts will begin effective July 2018 with the UBE, and North Carolina will become a UBE jurisdiction effective in February of 2019 as well. So we see those 3 states. There are more that I think are talking about it, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. In addition to the 30 states that are straightforward UBE, we have 11 other states that use the MEE, the MPT, and the MBE. Don't you love all these letters? But then have some state component as well. So it's essentially the UBE plus a couple of questions, and these would be states like Ohio and Indiana and so on. But when you add the 11 states that are essentially the UBE to the 30 states currently in the UBE, you can see that we're now covering over 40 states and jurisdictions in the United States. So this is clearly the exam on the rise. Now, the reason that I love the UBE, well, there's really 2 reasons. One is I think it's an easier exam, to be honest, than any state-specific exam that we teach. I think it's much easier than California, Florida, Texas, or Georgia, so the 4 that we concentrate on. I think the UBE is much more straightforward. There's no state-specific law. We saw this change in New York. New York went from a state-specific exam to the UBE in 2016, and we saw scores go up. And we saw people passing the bar who had not been passing the bar previously. I attribute that to the UBE. I think the weighting of the exam, 50% on the multi-state, 50% on the written portion, is equitable. I think it allows people to carry over if they're stronger in one part of the exam than the other. It doesn't penalize them, it helps them. So we saw people sometimes lifting their written score because of their multi-state or vice versa. And this is a good thing. But the real advantage of the UBE, in my mind, was that different jurisdictions have different cut points, different cut scores. So it takes a 266 to pass in New York, New Jersey, or DC, but only a 260 to pass in states like Missouri or New Mexico. Well, the interesting thing was, and we did several interviews, at least one that I can think of, with a student who sat for the New York UBE, didn't hit the 266, but came close, and then was able to wave into 5 more states under the UBE and accomplish their goal of becoming a lawyer and getting that ESQ behind their name and having the opportunity to practice right away. And then if they want to go back and take the New York bar, well, they can certainly do that. But having that ability to take your score and apply it somewhere else really opens up the field for a lot of people. So we see that as a big win. Now, obviously, one of the other advantages of the UBE, besides the fact that it's, I think, an easier test to pass and it's got more options once you get your score, is that you certainly can wave into more jurisdictions. You have more flexibility, and I think that's what they're trying to get to with a single uniform exam. Now, again, I heard pundits saying, oh, the UBE is going to be in all 50 states and territories, in the next 2 years. No, it's not. I'll just tell you right now, that is not going to happen. You are not going to see the UBE in California. You are not going to see it in Florida. You're not going to see it in a bunch of states. The ones that are opposed to the UBE are really opposed to it. I don't think you're going to see it in Virginia. I think there's some states that just are not going to go that way. Now, it's possible that Georgia would go to the UBE. It's possible that Texas would. They're talking about it. And sometimes that talk really turns into something. But there was a big wave of enthusiasm after New York switched to the UBE, in which, again, observers said, well, if New York does it, everyone will do it. By the way, most of those people were New Yorkers. And in truth, the people in California went, yeah, we actually don't care what you do in New York. And the people in Florida were like, great, you stay in New York. We don't want any part of that. So, it's an odd thing, but certainly 41 states, if it doesn't grow any more beyond that, that's still a pretty sizable range of states to be able to choose from. And, if it doesn't grow much beyond that, and I don't think it will, it's still a significant player in the bar exam world. And I love teaching the UBE. It's just a straightforward exam. As I say, we don't have to get into state-specific differences. They're 30-minute essays. The MPT is the uniform MPT, 90 minutes. It's a great one to work with and not that 3-hour monstrosity that they used to have in California. And I just think it's a good test to have. So if you're thinking about a test or an exam or a jurisdiction, look at the UBE. Now, that's particularly true if you're a foreign-trained attorney. And I want to talk specifically about how 2017 treated foreign-trained attorneys. And the answer is not well. It was a really bad year if you were trained outside the United States and you took an American bar exam. At current time, there are really 3+ states that let foreign attorneys sit for the exam. The 3 easiest states to sit are California, Texas, and New York under the UBE. And by easiest, I simply mean that your credentials will transfer in the most easily. Now, Georgia has added a provision for foreign-trained attorneys if they do an LLM at specific schools and meet other criteria. And other states have got similar kinds of programs that are very arcane and sort of difficult to figure out. You might be able to sit for an exam in a state if you're a foreign attorney in some states. And then there are states like Florida where it's absolutely impossible. You can't do it unless you're from Puerto Rico. But generally speaking, you've got very limited opportunities as a foreign-trained attorney. Well, the reality is that across the board, California and Texas and even in New York, foreign-trained attorneys did not do well at all. We're seeing pass rates in the 10 to 15% rate for foreign attorneys. And that's for everybody. For repeat bar takers, it was less than 10%. Now, this really galls me, frankly, because I know that there are bar review companies that really prey on foreign attorneys in their home countries and tell them, come take our course, we'll tell you everything you need to know, you can pass, it's easy to pass the American bar exam. And that's just not true. And the real killer is that they charge exorbitant fees for courses that are old, outmodeled, not in good shape, and don't prepare those attorneys in the least for the exam. And then they get a 10% pass rate, and people go, what the heck? It's a really uninformed audience that they're talking to. And I really hate seeing these companies. I've seen several pop up in 2017 that suddenly claimed that they were going to teach everybody how to pass the American bar exam, when most people in foreign countries can't even sit for the exam except in a couple of states. So again, I would tell you to be really careful about that. We've had great success for 20 years with foreign trained attorneys. And in 2017, we also had great success, and we've shared interviews with a number of those individuals on our website. You can go to celebrationbarreview.com/testimonials, and you will see video interviews as well as testimonial statements from people. And I think it's important to kind of understand how tough this exam is for anybody, but for a foreign trained attorney, even more so. And if you don't get started early enough, I think you're in real trouble. So candidly, if you are a foreign trained attorney and you're listening to this as we release this episode at the end of December of 2017, you should be looking at the July 2018 exam. That should be the soonest exam you sit for. Trying to get ready in something less time, like 6 or 7 weeks for an exam, almost virtually certain you will not pass the February 2018 exam if you haven't started your studies yet. So be really careful about that. Be careful about the quick fix or the companies that tell you that they're going to get you all set up and then you find out they've only been teaching the bar exam for a year or two. Not likely that you're going to be successful there, to be perfectly straightforward about it. Now, if you are a foreign trained attorney, I would encourage you to look at New York and the UBE first. You know, you can't transfer your New York UBE to California or Texas. But if you become a member of the New York Bar and you practice, you've got some opportunity down the road, potentially, depending on what the rules are. And the rules change from week to week, month to month, and year to year. But there's some potential to be able to practice elsewhere. But a New York bar license is a pretty useful license to have, particularly if you're foreign. And so I would look at that test first. And see if you can get into that. Oftentimes I hear from foreign attorneys who say, well, I don't really care, I just want to get barred in America. If that's the case, look at New York. The pass rate in California for foreign attorneys is horrifically low. Texas is not much better. Georgia's very low as well. New York, you got a shot. And that's the best I can tell you. And if you're in our course, you got better than a shot, but you got a shot at least. And I would look at the UBE first, certainly if you're a foreign trained attorney. Now let's take a little deeper dive, if we could, for a few minutes on what's happening in some of the specific states that we're working in, because I think 2017 was an interesting year in that respect as well. California remains the granddaddy of them all in terms of the number of bar takers in the country. It's over 8,000 typically in the July exam. And it also remains the most difficult exam to pass in the country. In 2017, there was a significant effort made by the deans of the California law schools and I think some others, the bar review companies maybe, and some others, to change the cut score, the pass score, from what was a 1440, and if you want to put that into regular UBE terms or National Bar Exam terms, a 144, to reduce that score down. And the Cal State Bar took inquiry and comments, talked about it, went back to the California Supreme Court, and said, what do you think? And the court said, nope, not changing that. We're going to stay at 1440. And everyone was like, whoa, what do you mean? Big surprise, I guess, to many people. We weren't surprised by it at all. We thought the number would stay that way. The bar examiners and the bar associations are proprietary groups. And in both of those situations, they've both been fairly clear that they really did not want to change or lower that score, in part because there's a strong presumption in California that there are a lot of unqualified people sitting for the exam. And this really comes from the fact that California continues to allow fixed facility schools, non-ABA accredited schools, correspondence law schools. Virtually anybody who can pay the fee can set up and call themselves a law school and put people into the bar exam. And unfortunately, as many of those students have come to find out, their schools are not very good. We saw a lot of those schools go under financially, and I'm not just talking about the InfoLaw schools that are out there, the for-profit schools, but we saw a lot of the correspondence schools struggling and closing up, and then the faculty reappears at another school with a new name and kind of starts the process over again. It's not a good situation in California, and it's had a terrifically negative impact on pass rates. And unfortunately, I think here it had a negative impact on the willingness of the court to admit new attorneys with a lower pass rate. Even though the one they were looking at was a whopping 3 points lower, they weren't even willing to do that. So I don't think we're going to see a change in the pass score for some time now in California. It's going to remain at 1440 for now. Now, in California in 2017, fewer than half of all the bar takers, first-time and repeat bar takers, passed the exam. That's the lowest in the country, and certainly a really difficult test. There was a switch in the July 2017 exam. The format switched from 3 days to 2 days, and the balance of the exam, the weighting went from 65% written and 35% on the multi-state to a 50-50 balance between the two. We predicted that that would cause a slight uptick in pass rates, which was correct. In July, the pass rate went up from a 34% rate in February to a 49% rate for overall pass. Repeat bar takers had a pass rate of 28% in July. And 60% of the takers on the exam were first-time applicants. So even with that, just still under 50%. But this switch of the 2-day exam was helpful. 5 essays, 1 90-minute test, performance test, instead of 2 3-hour performance tests. And giving higher value to the MBE definitely made a difference. And we saw changes for many people. And we saw improvements, real improvements in scores there and pass rates. But when we looked at February 2017, oh man, what a train wreck it was in California. The overall pass rate, all bar takers, was 34%. Now, there was a 3-to-1 margin of repeat bar takers to first-time bar takers. So you can imagine what that does to the pass rate when you've got 3 times the number of repeat bar takers in the beginning, and the repeat bar taker pass rate is typically 20 to 25%. And for some of these fixed facility and distance learning and correspondence schools, the pass rate was in the single digits. So it was really horrible. And candidly, I would expect the same thing in February of 2018. I think we're going to see very low pass rates across the country, but most notably in California on the February exam. Not because the test is harder again, but because of who the mix of people are that are taking the test. And it's also been my experience that a lot of people, particularly in California, get into a rut. They just take the exam over and over and over again. They don't change anything about the way they study. They continue to use IRAC. They continue to memorize. They continue to recite. And you would think after you've been kicked in the teeth 8, 9, 10 times with that approach, you'd start to say, hey, maybe that approach doesn't work. But, the power of media, the power of advertising, the power of peer pressure, the big box bar reviews are smart folks. I don't think they're very good teachers, but they are great marketers. And they have so totally and thoroughly brainwashed people. I suppose I'm giving away my political bias when I say that sometimes these big box guys are the Breitbart of our industry. All they do is tell people these ridiculous untruths, and they tell them so often and so loudly and so frequently that people buy it, even when their own reality is, hey, that didn't work. So, unfortunately, I think we're going to continue to see that trend for people in California, and I think we're going to see, again, bad pass rates in February and probably better in July, but I still wonder whether or not we'll see us peaking over the 50% rate. So, California is going to continue to be a tough exam. If people tell you that, happy days are here on the horizon because of the switch in format, well, it made a little bit of a change, but not a huge change, and you shouldn't expect anything substantial there. Well, what about in Florida? Florida, my home state. It's hard to even know what to tell you about Florida. We have what we call the Yankee go home approach here, which is, it's our little game. We're just going to do what we want to do, and you all stay up there and leave us alone. And I think that's really what they think in Tallahassee. In the February 2017 exam, the pass rate for first-time bar takers was 57%. And you might be saying, what about repeat bar takers? Well, it's a great question. We don't know the answer yet. We won't know until the National Conference releases their statistics, because Florida has decided in 2017 that they weren't going to publish repeat bar taker pass rates. It is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. There is no other state that I'm aware of that refuses to publish their repeat bar taker pass rates. They're going to become public knowledge when the NCBE releases their stats in April or May, but until then, we don't know. It's a weird thing. We'll see what happens. Now, I can point to the fact that in 2016, the repeat bar taker pass rate in Florida was 27%. I expect it will be something in that area again, which means that 57% first-time pass rate, which wasn't very good, probably meant the overall pass rate in Florida, because we have, again, a higher ratio of repeat bar takers typically than first-time takers. I think what we see is that February 2017, the overall pass rate in Florida was below 50%. And I think they were really reluctant to say that publicly, and that's the reason to not publish those numbers. In July 2017, well, the first-time pass rate again goes up, like it does around the country, to 71%. But again, assuming that the number of repeat bar takers stays relatively constant from year to year, and the pass rate for repeat bar takers stays relatively constant, I think we're probably looking at something in the low 60th percentile for pass rates overall in Florida in July 2017. So it remains a really difficult exam. Now, no changes in the format of the Florida bar exam. They're still doing the same thing that they've been doing. 3 essays, Florida multiple choice on the first day, and then the MBE. Now, one significant change came at the very end of 2017, quietly slipped in. The Florida State Supreme Court decided that they were going to allow the Florida bar to allow applicants to transfer their passing MBE scores from other jurisdictions. Now, this requires a little bit of explanation. We did a separate episode on it, but essentially, if you got a 136 or higher on the MBE in the last 25 months in another jurisdiction, so you went to New York, you went to California, you went to Texas, any place that gave the MBE, so any place other than Louisiana, and you got a 136 scaled or better, and it's in the last 25 months, you can come to Florida and apply that score to your Florida application. Now, some people said, oh boy, that means I can waive in. Nope. No way, no how, not going to happen. All it means is that you get to sit out the MBE day of the exam. And it's just that score goes in and you pass the MBE. But let's say you got a 150 on the MBE. Do you get to apply that 150 to your now new Florida score? Nope. Not at all. No way, no how, not going to happen. You just pass the MBE, that's all. You still have to get a 136 on the written portion, the day one, or what Florida calls Part A, by itself. It's a standalone score. So all of that is to say, if you took the MBE in the last 25 months and you got scaled 136 or better, and you want to take the Florida bar exam, this is the time. Wave in that MBE score, come and sit for the Tuesday day of the exam, get a 136 or better on its own, and you're in, which is great. That's a whole day off of the exam. It's a lot less studying, and it's a great opportunity for you. But if you had a fabulous MBE score, let's say you got a 150 or a 160 on the MBE in another jurisdiction, you might be better off coming to Florida, getting another one of those 160s to offset your Florida written score, what they call the compensatory method. So if you're confused about that and you're thinking about Florida, I invite you to contact me. We can walk you through the specifics of your case because it is complicated. But the bottom line is it's a little bit of an opening in the door, but it is clearly not reciprocity, not going to be reciprocity. It's not going to allow you to do anything in a compensatory model. And it's got to be a score that you got in the last 25 months. So if you got your MBE score 5 years ago, doesn't matter, isn't going to do you any good at all. So that's what's happening in Florida and the way that we see that exam coming along. I expect we'll continue to see relatively low pass rates in 2018 in that state. What about Georgia? Well, Georgia's still a really tough state, and they give very little information and very little feedback. 2017 was the year that Georgia had to acknowledge that they screwed up the pass rates and the scoring for 90 students, including one of ours, and they had to tell 90 people who had been told they failed that they passed. I give props to Georgia for being stand-up about it and acknowledging the mistake. They've never been terribly transparent about why the mistake occurred or whose responsibility it was. And I would say in general, Georgia's one of those exam jurisdictions that is not very transparent. They don't give much information to applicants about their scores. They only give them an MBE score. And if the MBE score isn't high enough, they don't even read their essays or performance tests. So you never get your MBE or your state essays or MPT scores back. You have no idea how you've done there. You just know if you passed or failed. The pass rate in February 2017 overall was 51% passing, so just barely over 50%, with a pass rate for repeat bar takers of 38%. In July, it was a bit better. It was 66.9% overall, and only a 33% pass rate for repeat bar takers. That's a bit of a surprise. Typically, we'll see a little better for repeat bar takers even in the July exam, did not in Georgia. When we put all those numbers together, we're still looking at slightly better than 50% pass rate, but not much. And I think Georgia will continue to be a very difficult exam. Now, I mentioned earlier that foreign attorneys can take the Georgia exam under limited circumstances. Pretty much a train wreck for foreign attorneys. We've been fortunate to have a few of them who've passed. But generally speaking, limited numbers of people sitting for that portion of the test or sitting for the test as foreign attorneys, very few of them are passing. So, tough exam, difficult to get through. Georgia's got their own essays. They do use the MPT. And I find Georgia tests potentially on a lot of subjects. They have a wide range of subjects and a 45-minute essay format, which is unusual. I would like to think that Georgia might be one of the states that considers switching to the UBE. I think there's some possibility of that. The former head of the Georgia Bar Examiners is now part of the national conference leadership, and I keep thinking he's going to have some influence back in Georgia to move them in that direction. But so far, nothing official, and I think at least for the next year or 18 months, we're continuing to look at a state-specific exam in Georgia. But beyond that, there's not much to say about that state. I will say that we do have a lot of Georgia bar takers in our course, and they tend to do pretty well, but they really have to put in a lot of effort. It's a tough exam. So if you're looking for an easy test, Georgia's not the place to go. What about Texas? That's the fourth unique state that we cover. I would describe Texas as an evolving test right now. I think the UBE is more of a possibility for Texas in the next 18 months. I know that the state bar is looking at it. There's some discussion going on. I think there's a lot of pressure from the law schools in Texas to move to the UBE. That may make a difference there. Texas has been such a weird state. I mean, so idiosyncratic with subjects like oil and gas. And I think more and more it's just becoming obvious that most people that pass the bar are not going to be oil and gas practitioners, for example, don't need those subjects. And the, Texas procedure and evidence just really is a ridiculous kind of part of the exam that doesn't make much of a difference, but adds a whole nother level of complexity to scoring and preparing and testing. And I think the examiners, frankly, are growing tired of trying to create material to test those subjects. And so it would not surprise me if they switched to the UBE. In terms of the pass rates, in February 2017, the pass rate in Texas overall was 61% with a 35% repeater percentage. Now, one of the interesting things was that more people actually failed. 647 people failed the February test, only 606 passed. So the more people failed the test in Texas in February than passed. That's a little terrifying when you think about it. So the overall rate was under 50%. In July 2017, we've got a lot more first-time bar takers, 2,100 passing first-time takers, 835 people who failed, overall percentage of 71%, but for repeat bar takers, 28% pass rate. So for repeat bar takers, Texas has been a tough exam. As you know, you get 5 tries at the Texas exam, and then you have to request special permission to take the test. So it puts a lot of pressure on people to get through the exam in those 5 tries. And as we see, the pass rates continue to be low. So in all 4 states that we talk about outside the UBE, California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas, we're still seeing pass rates that go from under 50% to just probably in the mid-60s at the best. So it's not a good time. When I first started teaching bar review 25 years ago, we typically saw pass rates that were in the high 80th percentile across the board. So obviously things have changed. And people that tell you that it's no big deal, you just go in, study for a few weeks, and take the bar exam, again, they're not telling you the truth. And when people say that you can prepare for these bar exams in 6 or 7 weeks, even if you're putting in 50 hours a week, that's just not very likely. And the numbers point that out. I think if the big box bar reviews are going to claim to be the one that everybody takes, then they ought to own the pass rates too. It seems to me that that's kind of, comes with the territory. And those pass rates are nothing to write home about. They're not doing anything that I think is significant in their teaching or in their development. And again, students are showing up to take the exam who are woefully unprepared for what the test is, and we're seeing it in the exam pass rates. Well, what about in the bar review itself in 2017? Those are the numbers and statistics and things that were happening in the bar exam. But what about in the bar review? And here I want to focus in large part on what we did at Celebration Bar Review, because I think there were some really groundbreaking things that occurred in 2017. One of the big trends that we saw was the growth of photo reading as a tool for our bar students. Now, I first introduced photo reading to our students about 7 or 8 years ago on a very limited basis, and I had success right from the beginning with it, but it was so different and weird to people that I didn't really push it very hard. I didn't talk a lot about it, but as we had successful students who would talk about it in their interviews or tell their friends, people kept saying, "What about photo reading? Can you explain it to me? Can you do more? Can you do more?" Today, more than 50% of our students use photo reading, and we've seen huge jumps in performance. In the July 2017 exam, we saw students routinely getting, brace yourself, 20, 30, 70-point increases in their scores who are photo readers. And when we interviewed them and asked them about it, and we said, "Why'd you do it? What caused it?" They said, "Photo reading, photo reading, photo reading." So some of you are asking, well, what is photo reading? Well, it's a whole mind reading system that lets you consume material at 25,000 words a minute. The average attorney reads at 110 words a minute with about 50% tested comprehension. Photo readers test at about 70% comprehension. In using photo reading with our proprietary intuitive method to answer essays and performance tests and multi-state questions, we've seen these extraordinary growths. And what I forgot to tell you is that the people that saw the gains of 30, 40, 50, 70 points, well, obviously we know that they're gains of that many points because they had failed the bar exam previously, in every case with a big box bar review. And so we see these enormous changes that were happening because people were studying differently. They're able to read faster, read more, retain more information, and use that information more effectively. Now, if you'd like to see some of those testimonials for yourself, don't take my word for it. Go to our website, click on the button at the top for testimonials. You'll see videos. There are a bunch of them. Click on them and watch them. Listen to people talk for themselves about what a difference it made to use photo reading. And so we've incorporated that as a tool for many of our students. It's an option that you can add to your course. And we've had students add it. As I say, more than half of our students now are using photo reading in their course and getting great results from that. To help those students, we did something for the first time that we've done in Celebration Bar Review, and that was we held a live photo reading boot camp here in Celebration, Florida. It was a great experience, a 2-day opportunity. I was joined as a co-teacher by Millicent St. Clair, who is a national trainer for Learning Strategies Incorporated out of Minnesota. They're the people that created photo reading. And Millicent and I worked together, and we taught photo reading to our students. We had a great group of people, and it was an extraordinary experience. People came away just dazzled. Great response from everyone that was there. We're going to do more of that in 2018 and look for announcements coming soon. But this was a really exciting opportunity to take these tools and really put them to use. We're also using paraliminal recordings. These are recordings to help you deal with any kind of negative blocks that you've got, like anxiety or attention deficit disorder or sleep problems. Just being able to get clear focus and to do better work. And so we've applied a lot of this technology and what we know about how the brain functions and how people learn into the work that we're doing. And we're going to see more and more of that, I think, in 2018 as we go forward. Awesome tools, and more of our students are taking advantage of them. One of those tools that we really got excited about in 2017 was the idea of mind maps. Now, if you're not familiar with mind maps, it's simply a visual representation of material that you've read or studied. And we liked mind maps, but we weren't quite sure how we were going to incorporate them into the bar review. And then we started doing more with photo reading. And the folks at Learning Strategies said, you ought to check out the mind mapping. We think it could make a big difference. And Millicent really strongly encouraged that. And so we started introducing it on a limited basis in 2017. And wow, what a difference it made for people. We saw some folks getting huge jumps in their scores who were mind mapping. And we said, wow, we got to do more with this. So at the end of 2017, we did a live webinar on mind maps, and it was really well received. And so we've made it into an evergreen webinar. You can check it out. As I said at the beginning of today's podcast, we make that available to you on demand for $95. It's an hour and 15-minute podcast to show you how to use mind maps, how to put them together, how to work with them, how to use them to study on the bar exam. I really encourage everyone to check it out. It is so much more effective than flashcards or outlines or underlining and highlighting and taking notes copiously. It is just a powerful, powerful tool, and we really like that. And so we're going to do more with that as well. We're also going to take some of the material that we used in our photo reading bootcamp and make it available in webinar form in 2018, specifically sections that we did on using photo reading for essay writing and using photo reading for the performance tests, using photo reading for the MBE. And so I hope you'll check those tools out when they come out in 2018. Now, as I said, we plan to do more live events. We're going to do another photo reading boot camp in the spring, so watch for that announcement coming out. We also are talking about doing some live events prior to the bar exams. We don't have any specific plans yet, but we've had that request. People love doing the live event here in Celebration, so I think we're going to do some of that as well, and I'm excited about that in the upcoming year. One of the other lessons I think we learned in 2017 that we can take into 2018 is that repeat bar takers really can succeed. It is possible to take any exam and pass, even if you failed it multiple times. And by multiple, I mean in some cases double-digit times. You can pass the exam if you're willing to do things differently. Here's what I saw repeatedly. When people came to me who had failed the exam before, and we're willing to be open to new ideas, like the way that we approach the material, the writing style being different, not using issue spotting and IRAC writing, not reading left to right word for word, not trying to force their way through the multi-state. When they came with kind of an open mind, a clean slate approach, they passed the bar exams. And we've been really excited to tell their stories to other people. On the other hand, when a repeat bar taker comes to me and they're, kind of arms crossed saying, yeah, prove to me that you're better than Barbary or Kaplan or Themis or Ameribar or whatever, and I'm going to do exactly what I did with them, even though it didn't work many, many times. Well, it's kind of an uphill battle. It's tough to help people be successful if they keep repeating their same mistakes. And so we've just kind of learned that at that point we have to say, you know what, we're probably not the course for you. If you want to keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting the same results. And eventually you may either quit, which would be too bad, or you're going to say, you know what, maybe I ought to try it. And when people got to the point where they said, maybe I ought to try a different approach, something that's not just a one click off of, the big box, but something completely different, then they got completely different results. Now, I will say, giving themselves enough time to study was a big advantage. We found that you don't need to spend hundreds of hours to study. 250 to 300 hours was the sweet spot for our students in 2017. People that studied about that number of hours had the best results, but you needed an early start, which means that for many people, we're getting close to the last point where you can register for the February exam, and many people now should be registering and starting to study for the July exam. The good news is that if you're listening or watching this podcast pretty much near our release date, you can study about 5 hours a week for the July exam and be ready and probably never get your studies up over about 15 or 20 hours a week, even at the end. So it's a huge advantage to begin early. That old model of waiting 6 or 7 weeks, cramming for that period of time, trying to memorize and regurgitate and spit it all back, the examiners are being very clear. They're not interested in that. They're not rewarding that behavior. They're not rewarding that writing style. They're not rewarding that approach to the multi-states. It's just not working. And the numbers are so clear in this respect. And so I'm really proud that we've done better than these rates across all of the jurisdictions for years. But the truth is, you don't have to be locked into bad pass rates. You only have to be locked into the ideas you choose to follow. And for the people that are following what their big box reviews and their big box schools are telling them, that's the result that they seem to be getting. One of the other things we saw in 2017 was a proliferation of law schools starting their own bar prep classes, which on balance, at first blush, sounds like a good thing. Prepare people. And here's the thing. Law schools are really bad at preparing people to practice law. That's not what they do. They prepare you to think like a lawyer, but not to practice law. And so when they got to, how do we prepare people to take the bar exam? Well, it was the blind leading the blind. What most of these schools did is they hired a former student who hadn't found a job yet so they could improve their bar hire statistics. And then that person just took out their old Barbary materials or Kaplan materials, and they did the whole course the way that they did it, which wasn't all that good to begin with. And then it really even got crazier because students paid tuition dollars for that bar prep class and then had to go take a bar review course and pay again. So they got to pay twice for crappy courses. Go figure. We found students consistently coming to us who said, you know what, I've got to sit through that course at school. I'm going to pretty much ignore it and just do what you tell us to do. And those people passed. The people that said, well, I'm going to do what my law school tells me to do. Okay, well, good luck with that. A lot of law schools had a lot of trouble. More than a few deans lost their jobs this year because of their bar pass rates. And frankly, there's just not much to write home about in these law school bar prep classes. They're not very strong. And so while that continues to be sort of window dressing to make it look like a law school's doing something, the bottom line is the law schools are really ill-equipped to do this. They don't give the kind of preparation and assistance that students need. And then they end up telling them, hey, maybe you should just sit out and not take the exam so that you don't blow up our first-time bar taker pass rates. That's an interesting game that got played by a few schools where they actually paid students to sit out their potential first-time taker date so that they would no longer be first-time takers when they went to take the bar exam, even though it was their first time. Love that. You gotta really give your credit for creative thinking to some of the schools around the country doing that. I think ultimately what we're going to see is that more and more law schools are going to be forced to make hard decisions about whether or not they want to stay open, what their class sizes are going to be, how they're going to approach what they do. I don't think you're going to see many law schools really move into bar prep as their primary focus. It's just not what their faculty is trained to do. It's not the way they're designed. And I think it's really a bad fit. And we're going to see that over time more and more, that schools that insist on doing this to make it look like they're preparing their students are really doing them no favors at all. The truth is that many of those same schools have very cozy arrangements with the big box bar reviews and are really just sort of double dipping. They're paying professors twice to do the same work in the bar review and in law school, and they're taking money from the bar review companies. So it's kind of I've never felt very good about that part of the bar review industry. It's why we've stayed out of that realm entirely. It's a really sleazy way to operate, frankly, and there's a lot of that goes on. So I guess really what I'm saying to you is caveat emptor. Be smart. Think about what you're doing. Think about how you want to prepare. If you want the big box bar review for 6 weeks and you just love the idea of issue spotting and doing what you did in law school, and you're willing to live with a pass rate that's about 50% or lower, you ought to take the big box bar review for sure. But if that makes you uneasy, if that makes you think, I'm not quite sure these guys are on the up and up, then stop and think about it. Check it out. Find out what else is out there. Look at us. Give us your good once-over. I think you'll be impressed with what you see. We've got haters out there for sure. But the truth is, after 25 years, you're going to have some haters. But we have an awful lot of people who swear by what we do and how we do it. And we're very proud of that. And we're very grateful for so many loyal students who tell their friends about us. And that's how most people come to find us. I think in summarizing what's happened in the bar review and in the bar exam in 2017, it was a tough year. It isn't going to get appreciably better in 2018, in my view. There may be pockets of light, there may be some glimmers of hope, but in general, it's going to continue to be a very tough exam wherever you take it, and it's going to require a substantial amount of work. And so I encourage you to really do your homework, be prepared, come at it early, and then be open to learning new ideas and new approaches. And we'd love to be part of that for you. If you want to know more about that approach, I invite you again to join us on Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for how to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. I think you're going to find it's a really great opportunity to see this different approach in practice, see what it means, how we lay it out, and hear from people who've used it successfully. Really would hope to see you there, and you can register again on our video page or by going to our website. On a final note, I just want to say to everybody who's been with us in 2017, thank you so much. I'm so deeply appreciative of all the comments, the thoughtful responses. I didn't particularly love the haters, but I respect them, and they were few in number. But for all of you who really sort of showered me with love and confidence and affection and enthusiasm, I'm so appreciative. And our staff has been amazing. We've added editors in 2017. We've added staff people. We've done more than we've ever done before, in part because we want to keep up with the demand. As more people have heard about what we do and the way we do it, there is increasing demand for our services. And we've tried to accommodate that by being innovative and offering new opportunities, things like live coaching and some of these specialized webinars. So I'm really appreciative for all of that. I'm very humbled by the success that we've had and by the kindness of the many people that we come in contact with, both as suppliers, editors, workers, staff, team, vendors, but mostly our students. They are just the best people in the whole world. I say that sometimes we are the bar review for the underdog, but I'm so excited when I see our students becoming members of the bar and going out and really preserving the rule of law and working hard to make sure that the institutions of our country and our government continue to function, I think, the way they were designed to. That makes us very, very happy. I have a sign on my desk that says, "I have my life back." It was made by the guy, Jimmy Don, that makes metal signs for Chip and Joanna Gaines. They have a TV show called Fixer Upper. And we got Jimmy Don to make this sign for us because so many people say to me when they pass the bar, they say, "I have my life back." That's what we want for you. We want you to get your life back. We want you to move on with your life, to have success, to have a great future and a career in law. And I hope for those of you that are watching or listening today, that 2018 is just that for you. It's a year that you get your life back. It's a year that you get past the hurdle of the bar exam, that you go on to do great things in your career in law. And we would hope that we could be a part of it. But for all of you, I want to wish you the very best in the coming year. Wish you a happy new year. Thank you again so much for listening and watching and giving us your feedback. Look forward to sharing lots of new ideas and thoughts with you. We'll be back again next week as we start our 2018 podcast series. So for now, goodbye, everybody. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.